Sulimil Parabellum. Mention 9mm around anyone who's been in the hobby long enough and watch what happens. The shoulders tighten. The jaw sets. Something biological takes over. The 45 hits harder. They can't help it. Georg Luger drew up this cartridge in 1902 for the German Navy, and the name traces back to the DWM factory motto, Sis Pacem Parabellum. If you want peace, prepare for war. I was fairly certain that phrase was tattooed somewhere on John Wick, but apparently not. The drama this caliber carries didn't start with him anyway. The FBI walked away from 9mm in the 90s, decided the .40 Smith & Wesson was the smarter choice. Wider meant better. 20 years later, their own research brought them back. Modern 9, 40 and 45 loads all land in comparable territory when it comes to what they do in tissue. What separates them is recoil and round count. Fewer misses matter more than any diameter advantage. That argument is now yours to deploy. You will use it regularly. 22 long rifle. Pick any topic in firearms and someone is wrong about it loudly. Caliber wars, platform loyalty, which country builds them better? The fights never end and nobody ever concedes. Except on one thing. The 22 long rifle produces no disagreement. None. It is the one caliber the entire community agrees on without negotiation. Stevens Arms developed it in 1887, and the world has been producing it in volumes that genuinely don't add up ever since. 2 to 4 billion rounds annually in the United States alone. Running out of 22 during a shortage triggers something close to genuine distress in people who have been shooting long enough. That dependency makes complete sense once you understand where it fits. It fits everywhere. The person learning to shoot for the first time. The competitor chasing Olympic gold with a rifle that costs more than a car. The hunter after small game. The operator who needs quiet and doesn't need power. Same cartridge, 4 completely unrelated applications, 0 complaints from any of them. The self-defense question always surfaces eventually. Someone will argue it falls short. Someone else will point out that nobody is volunteering to stand down range. Better tools exist for that job, genuinely. But the 22 was never really about that job to begin with. In 1956, Eugene Stoner was at Armalite developing the AR-10 around 7.62 NATO. The Army passed on it, missed the evaluation window entirely. General Wyman came back and asked them to rethink the whole thing around something lighter and smaller. A year later, the AR-15 existed alongside the .223 Remington cartridge it was built for. Armalite couldn't scale production, sold the licensing to Colt, and the Army remained unconvinced until Southeast Asia made the decision for them. Jungle combat in Vietnam almost never stretched past 50 meters. Carrying full-power 7.62 into that environment was like bringing a sledgehammer to hang a picture frame. Soldiers could load nearly double the ammunition in 5.56 for identical carry weight. McNamara put the M16 in every infantryman's hands by 1963. The terminal behavior of the round at velocity surprised people. It can break apart inside tissue and produce damage well beyond what its size suggests. That's not guaranteed behavior though. Barrel length, distance, and bullet construction all affect whether it fragments or passes clean through. The confusion that catches people regularly, 223 Remington and 5.56 NATO are visually the same cartridge. The military loading runs at higher chamber pressure. Firing it in a rifle spec'd only for 223 operates outside the design envelope. The warning exists on most manufacturers' literature. The font size varies. See section D cartridge. Hollywood spent decades establishing this cartridge as the villain's ammunition. AK in frame meant the character was on the wrong side of the story, every time without exception. The Soviet Union developed it in 1943 as a middle ground solution between pistol and full rifle power. The AK-47 was engineered specifically around it 4 years later, and both spread across 3 continents over the following decades. Current estimates put AK variants in circulation somewhere between 75 and 100 million units. When reliability arguments start, this combination surfaces early and always comes with the same story. Buried in mud for a decade, dug up, still runs. Heavier projectile than 5.56, slower velocity, larger wound channel, loses energy faster at range. Inside 300 meters, the gap between the two is narrow enough that in most real engagements, which happen in cities at close distance, the difference is essentially academic. 308 Winchester, 7.62 51mm NATO. NATO in the early 50s needed a single standard cartridge across member armies. The Americans pushed for something close to 30.06 performance. The Europeans wanted something they could actually manage. The 7.62 521 that came out of 1952 satisfied neither side completely. Everyone signed on regardless. That is a remarkably accurate portrait of how multinational committees produce outcomes. The cartridge outlasted the arguments about it because it genuinely earns its place. Bolt guns, semi-automatic battle rifles like the G3 and the FAL, belt-fed machine guns, reach past 800 meters in trained hands and the performance stays consistent. Snipers worldwide keep it chambered, not because nothing better exists, but because the ammunition is on every NATO installation on Earth and the ballistics behave predictably. Predictable at distance under field conditions is worth more than impressive numbers on paper. One detail that bites people: civilian .308 Winchester and military 7.62 X51 share the same dimensions but have different chamber tolerances. The industry understands the distinction. Shooters learn it at the ammunition counter. 45 ACP, 2 World Wars. Full stop. It starts in the Philippines in 1899. American soldiers carrying 38 long Colt sidearms were encountering Moro fighters who absorbed multiple rounds and kept advancing. The Army drew one conclusion: 45 caliber minimum. John Browning had the 45 ACP ready by 1904. The 1911 pistol followed 7 years later and stayed in U.S. Army service for 74 consecutive years across both world wars. The technical detail that lives outside general knowledge, but that every suppressor owner already has memorized: the 45 ACP is subsonic by default. A standard 230 grain load exits around 850 feet per second, comfortably below the sound barrier. Run any factory ammunition through a suppressor, and it performs cleanly without any special loading. That is why the 45 appears in every suppressor conversation without being invited. 2 World Wars. 357 Magnum. The 38 Special and the 44 Magnum both have their advocates, and neither one is the subject here. We took the middle option and kept moving. By 1934, American criminals had adapted to police capabilities. Vests were available, automobiles provided real cover, and standard 38 Special loads weren't penetrating sheet metal reliably. That was a documented operational failure requiring a documented solution. Elmer Keith, a figure who appears in every serious revolver discussion carried by equal parts reputation and mild alarm, had spent years running 38 Special brass at pressures nobody had sanctioned. Phil Sharp and Douglas Wesson took that foundation and built the 357 Magnum on top of it, releasing it in 1935. The first production revolver went directly to J. Edgar Hoover. The dimensional detail every revolver shooter eventually explains to someone. The 357 case runs about 1/8 of an inch longer than 38 Special. That length makes it physically impossible to chamber a 357 round in a 38 revolver. The reverse is not true. A 357 cylinder accepts both. Practice with the affordable round, carry the serious one when the context demands it. The 357 held the title of most powerful commercial revolver cartridge for exactly 21 years before Elmer Keith decided that still wasn't the answer. What followed was the 44 Magnum. Elmer Keith was a man who treated sealing as a starting point. 12 gauge. The gauge system comes from 19th century measurement logic that has no modern equivalent. Take a pound of lead, cast spherical balls matching the bore diameter exactly. Count how many fit. In 12 gauge, the answer is 12. Larger number means smaller bore. The arithmetic runs in the direction nobody expects, and the industry never bothered to replace it. Attempt to explain this to someone outside the shooting world, and you will see their interest leave their face in real time. The reason 12 gauge dominates isn't about raw output. It's about range of application. Light birdshot for birds. 9 pellet buckshot loads that at under 35 yards produce results that make experienced shooters go quiet for a moment. A 1-ounce slug that functions as a credible deer round out to 100 yards. Less lethal beanbag and rubber options for crowd management. One platform, radically different behavior depending entirely on what goes into it. That flexibility drives every home defense conversation this caliber enters. During the First World War, Germany filed a formal protest against American use of 12 gauge in trench warfare. The United States acknowledged receipt and continued operations unchanged. This cartridge was designed for the Mosin Nagant in 1891 and has been in continuous military service for over 130 years. Nothing else in the world holds that record. Raise that figure in any debate about obsolescence, and the debate tends to stop. The R does not stand for Russian. It designates the case rim type. Rimmed. That correction has been issued more times on firearms forums than any other single fact in the community's online history. Correct someone on it and you join one group. Get corrected on it and you join the same group from the other direction. Performance lands close to modern .308 in terms of effective range, energy delivery, and practical accuracy. It persisted through the entire 20th century on the weight of enormous global stockpiles, and because the platforms built around it, the Dragunov SVD and the PKM machine gun specifically, remain genuinely effective enough that retirement requires justification nobody has been able to provide. Family BMG. Anyone who shoots this caliber with real enthusiasm has delivered the following statement with complete sincerity and unbroken eye contact. A near miss from this round is fatal on shockwave alone. The conviction is absolute. The claim is false. It travels anyway because it has personality. John Browning developed the 50 BMG in 1918 specifically to engage aircraft and defeat light vehicle armor. Half-inch diameter. Subtlety is not the design brief. A second myth has been circulating with identical confidence for decades. That international treaty prohibits its use against human targets. That treaty does not exist and never existed. The people who cite it are certain. Correcting them more than a handful of times produces diminishing returns. What is factually established? The M2 Browning has been chambering this cartridge since 1921 and remains active in nearly every Western military on Earth. Oldest American weapon system still in operational service. The Barrett M82 connects with targets reliably past 1/500 meters. Not the cartridge most associated with precision work. Precise enough when it matters. 10 calibers down. Now, you know enough to start at least 6 arguments at any range in the country. Which one do you actually run? Which one is on your list? And which one do you think gets more credit than it deserves? Leave it in the comments. Thanks for watching. See you next time.